Making your way through an endless stream. Silence cuts reality, body seems only for a moment. Moments always seem to fade away. Searching for the picture, goes out of reach. Holding on freedoms that yours to keep. Oh, only for a moment. Moments always seem to fade away. Push through a door into an empty street. No one's there to meet you 'cause you're still asleep. But only for a moment, moments always seem to fade away.
Helps to have the mic on, doesn't it? Hello, everyone. Greg Staley here from Diverge Media. We're excited to welcome our next guest, Scott Logan. Scott was fined for avoiding a stay at a quarantine hotel, and he's going to walk us through that story here and the amount of the fine and how that kind of came to be. So, everybody, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Scott Logan.
Hi there.
How are you, Scott?
Very good, thanks. And you, Greg?
So, now you messaged me, and I don't want to get any of this wrong. So my understanding was it was about a $6,600 fine.
Almost. $6,255.
Okay, and so the fine was handed out for your avoidance of a stay at a quarantine facility. Now you informed them that you're living in an apartment alone. You had food. You had reasonable accommodations and were able to stay isolated in your own apartment, but they still sent you the fine. So how did this all shake out?
Well, you have to know a little bit about my story first. So like you said, I have my own apartment. I live alone, and my wife lives in Mexico. So I was there in Mexico like Christmas 2019, and she was going to come for the summer. So we had a long distance marriage. And with the pandemic, she was unable to come for the summer. So we hadn't seen each other since Christmas 2019. So things were getting better here. So I made arrangements, or I bought a ticket to go for this Christmas, for leaving Toronto November 2nd, 2020. So, I stocked up my apartment. I filled up the freezer, had all the canned goods, everything I would need, because I was aware that there was the 14-day quarantine. So I prepared for that and was ready to do that, which I have done. So away I go, to be with my wife over Christmas and everything, and it was great. And then all of a sudden, these new restrictions started to happen. First of all, there was the COVID hotel. And I go, geez, that doesn't sound right, And then I heard, via the news, keeping in touch from Mexico, that these hotels, there's sexual allegations where staff had come in and abused women in these hotels. The food was terrible, being donated, I guess, by the Red Cross, from what I heard at one point. And then, of course, at least one hotel near the airport had at least 5 staff members contract the virus. So, I'm not young anymore, but I'm not too old, but I did not want to come in contact with that. I didn't want to get sick when I'd been away and being healthy. So I said, well, unless they change things, I just don't want to do this. It just doesn't sound like a good plan. So I was supposed to come back January the 7th. in the beginning of January, returning back to Canada. And then New Year's Eve, Trudeau came out and said that you needed a 72-hour negative COVID test to re-enter Canada with a negative COVID test within 72 hours. And so I found several labs in Mexico, in where I was staying in Mexico, and it would take like 5 days, 2 days to get an appointment, 3 days to get the test results. So it was unattainable. So I go, okay, well, I can't go back on January the 7th. Then the Mexican Airlines then said that starting February the 8th, they would offer COVID testing at the airports. So you go an hour before your flight, you get your negative COVID test, and then it's pretty much 1 day traveling. And so I would have it within 72 hours of arriving in Canada. So that was going to be perfect. Then just a few days prior to that, our Mr. Trudeau came out with the new travel regulations again, canceling all flights to and from Mexico. So I was stuck, till May. And so luckily I was with my wife, and that was not a problem. So, but I kept monitoring the news and everything. And, at one point they were wanting the COVID test for anybody coming in by air, but the land crossings, the border crossings, no one was having to go into any hotel. So it's like, a double standard. And then, it almost seems that the government is punishing people if they take a vacation. Now, I was not on a vacation. I was visiting family. And a friend of mine, she's originally from Germany. Her mother died. And so she went to be with her mother and got back about a week ago. And she was there for a month. Now, she applied for the compassionate exemption of the hotel, which she was approved. So she returned from Germany, went to her house, where she lives with her son, and is quarantining. So, if this pandemic is so dangerous, why is it that, some people can be exempted from the hotel and then others can't? And then, of course, there's our prime minister who spent, the long weekend in the UK. He and his entourage, they flew into Toronto early in the week, I believe, and later in the evening. So they stayed the night at the hotel, and then when they got their negative COVID test, which you get at the airport when you arrive, and then he flew off to Ottawa. So he left a hotel. I doubt if it was one of the COVID hotels, and went back to Ottawa, where he supposedly is doing the remainder of his 14-day quarantine. So there's a lot of double standards here. It's almost good for some people and not good for other people, and it just doesn't make sense. So I thought, well, there's rumors that at the time when I did come back, there was a lawsuit taken out against the use of these hotels, and I was really hoping it would pass, and it still may. So we can hope for that.
You're referring to the Justice Center appeal,
yes,
and they're in the appeal process after the first ruling, which I'm still baffled at, ruling that this violation of rights is constitutional, because in their mind, I'm assuming that this emergency they claim is so major and detrimental that we just can throw common sense out the window. And kind of situations like yours is where I think it comes to the forefront, Scott, is, you're there, you're seeing family, but it's more than that. It's the fact that you had accommodations getting back. Maybe you didn't file the proper paperwork. Maybe you could have got the compassionate care, but it's neither here nor there. We're punishing Canadians through these processes for just simply trying to live their lives. And then you talk about that double standard of Justin Trudeau coming back from the UK. And I think he did stay at they said quarantine hotel, but my understanding was that they took a hotel and then sectioned off the entire floor for him. And then he didn't stay the normal 14 days. I think he stayed under 72 hours and he was jetting off to somewhere else. But this is kind of that double standard, right?
Exactly. Like supposedly, well, with the quarantine hotel, from what they told me at the airport, was you have to stay there for the 3 days. So you get your negative COVID test and it was great. I got it within 12 hours from when I landed. And same thing that I heard about Trudeau also. He got his within 12 hours. He got that, and then he resumed to Ottawa. But like you have to. For me, I had to have a negative COVID test to even get on the Air Canada flight, and then I got the test at the airport, which came back, of course, negative. And I followed everything. I used the ArriveCan app to let them know I was coming and everything, and then followed the quarantine regulations, to the letter. Did the 8-day test and had a visit, had a couple phone calls, just to make sure I was okay and staying in quarantine. So, I'm not one to break the law, so to speak. I'll certainly follow procedures, but on one hand, some procedures are out in left field. They just don't make sense and they're not appropriate.
And this has kind of been the argument on the quarantine facilities, and these were some of the arguments that were brought forward about people that have accommodations. And it does seem kind of out in left field. It seems more like and this is my opinion, I don't know what your take is on it, but for me, it seems like a political statement more than a medical one that makes sense
Right.
logically. It's one that you can signal, hey, this is what we're doing to prevent all these things that you're scared about. Not that it necessarily makes sense and it's coherent, but it's at least you can point to something and you say, we did that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. Like through all this whole pandemic, the government has to look like they're doing something and in control. Because, even with this wearing masks, if you go to the OHIP website under COVID face coverings, it tells you clear as day that masks, face coverings will not protect you from any virus. They will prevent, they say, the spread, which of course, if you happen to sneeze, the mask is going to catch a lot of droplets and it won't be, so far spread. But, the government has to appear that they know what they're doing. And all the forecasts seem to have been wrong. A lot of things they're doing are wrong, like the lockdowns and the whole shebang. But
well, and let me ask about this a little bit more. So you kind of have an inside view here. How was the travel process? I mean, you've been going through it for probably the duration of this, but how has it affected your ability to travel, to see your wife and family? And then what's your take on it? What does and doesn't make sense out of this travel plan?
well, there's not a lot of sense to it. Like for example, India had this outbreak recently, and they canceled the flights from India. Yet, I would say about 40% of the plane from Mexico City to Toronto were Indians. People from India coming to Canada. So, instead of going direct, they came around and got in like this. And several of the guys I talked to, they were all prepared. They had booked the quarantine hotel. I mean, they're going to have to stay in a hotel anyways. Like they're here for visit, family, friends. So maybe they have a place to stay after, but they had already booked their hotel. But it's much different than a resident who has their own accommodation without contact with other people. So, and even on the airplane, this was a big plane. It had 9 seats across. So, every seat was full. Like if you go into the airport, in the waiting room when you're getting ready to board, they have all the seats. Every other seat is blocked, so you're at least 2.5 feet away from sitting away from the next person. But then here you are in the airplane and you're shoulder to shoulder with 2 other people. Like it's just, again, it's something that doesn't make sense if this is such a scary situation we're in.
Well, and again, we're not downplaying here. We know it's a problem. We know it's a problem in elderly populations, and we've said from the get-go to protect the most vulnerable. But then you hear those kind of like those reality checks. You can't see something like that and then go, okay, this still makes sense, because you go from, like you said, you can't even sit within a seat of each other before you board the plane, but then you go onto the plane with the recycled air that you're all breathing together, and then it's
Yeah.
okay. Now you can sit side by side and no problems. And
Yeah.
it's these kinds of inconsistencies again and again, I think, have been, I guess, wake up calls for a lot of people of beginning the questioning process. And it sounds
Mhm.
like this very personal story kind of hits you in a way that made you question some of what was going on as well.
Oh, exactly. And, there were a couple other Canadians on the plane with me who, again, had their own place to stay. And, one guy, and both these guys were working, in Mexico. Again, they weren't vacationing. They were there with a purpose. And coming back, and they said, no, this is not right. I live in Toronto. I have I live in the basement of my parents' house. So the contact is very limited. Their parents weren't that old either. So they said, no, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight this ticket because it's just not right.
Do you have your court date yet? Is that set up? Or is it just?
Yeah, they'll be, well, if you look at the ticket, it says you have 15 days to set up a court date. But I think because of the volume, we were given this form, which says now you have 30 days to register if you're going to pay or if you're going to fight. And so I'll be sending mine in this weekend. So because I definitely want to take it to court and say this is unreasonable.
So to clarify, you do plan on fighting it. Have you reached out for
Yes.
any legal counsel as of yet?
No, I put a couple feelers out, but haven't heard anything back yet. Like Rebel News, I've been following them for the past year and sent a message to them, but they must be swamped. They're pretty busy, fighting the fines kind of thing. So,
well, I can relate because I'm the club too. I guess this is my purple. I don't really want to show it because it's private information, but there it is.
there you
I got
go.
mine too. Yeah, so I got mine for covering the No More Lockdowns event in Brantford, and I said, I said to my wife when it happened, the police officer was maybe 5 or 6 parking spots over, and they were sitting in their car with a notepad out, and I said, I bet you he's taking our license plate and sending us a fine. And then took a while, but they eventually sent the peace officer to the door because it was a different city. They had to transfer it. It was a headache for them, which I'm glad it was.
Yes.
And then I'll go. I guess mine's on the 27th. I'll appear in court and basically plead not guilty and challenge it based on the charter. And at that point, hopefully somebody wants to represent me. I don't want to have to take this all the way myself.
Right.
But I'm hoping. I don't know about you. I'll get your perspective on this. Part of me wants to see the process play out and win. But part of me would be completely content if they just said, you know what, Greg, we're just going to drop it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm kind of the same way. On one hand, let's do it. Let's bring attention to this issue and say no more. This is ridiculous. But I've seen a lot of people lately from protests that were ticketed at protests, I guess similar to yourself, where the judge has just thrown it out. They said don't bother. That's it. So
fingers crossed.
But if that does happen, then what we need to do also is to publicize that, to say, okay, I kind of won. My case didn't have to go to court or to trial, but on the same hand, that is winning, because the judge has taken a look at it, obviously, and said, this is ridiculous. So they throw it out. So, but we need to publicize that, for other people so that they know not to accept, because I'm sure there's people that have just, like if I get a traffic ticket, I know I'm speeding, I pay the ticket, and even if there's doubt, I'll probably pay the ticket kind of thing. I'm not
it's the convenient.
Yeah. But I mean, this is both money, and it is, because it is $6,200, but it's also the principle of the thing.
Absolutely.
And you hear about so many companies bringing business guys, rich business guys into the country. Like I think Irving out in the East Coast built a new destroyer. So they brought in all these people from out of the country to check it out and go for a little cruise and everything. They didn't have to quarantine. They flew in, went to the ship, went for the cruise, and then went back home. Like, it's double standard. It's not one rule for all.
They're getting dropped more than people think. We watched recently 4 tickets out of Saskatchewan, Alberta, I believe, the JCCF put out. We posted an article on it. 4 more were dropped. And the issue is, you're kind of right, it is a victory in a sense when the court drops it. But the issue is those fundamental principles that were the reason they dropped it, because they had a crappy case in the first place. Yeah. They don't get heard. And then it allows that process to continue onward because the precedent hasn't been set, so they can continue. This is kind of what I see happening. So they press on the ones they think they have a more legitimate case, and then back off on the ones they don't. But I mean, at the end of the day, David Menzies from the Rebel, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said he got his summons. Their discovery against him was handshakes, smiling, and laughing. It's like, my goodness, if that's where we're at in our country, where I can't go to an outdoor event, at the same time hundreds upon hundreds of people can go to big box stores,
yes,
and do my job as media, then we're in serious trouble. And if I find the fundamental issue here is, it's kind of like a story like yours. You'll probably have friends and family that you've told, and then they just kind of downplay the story. They don't understand how crazy this is. And then even a personal story, you're like, really? It's still not that important to you. And in your case, like $6,200 is nothing to scoff at. That's a big amount of money. You're able to quarantine it at your own home. It made more sense to do so there. And yet I imagine still there's people that say you should have just done what they wanted you to do.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No doubt. But, in order to bring change, if something is wrong, if it is unacceptable, you can't just stand down and let it happen. You have to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. And we have to stand up for ourselves and for each other and stop it. And if nobody does that, nothing will change.
I think that's a perfect place to end it. Well, thank you for joining us, Scott. I really do appreciate it. I think these are the important stories to tell. It kind of puts a firsthand perspective on the craziness of some of these bills and some of these restrictions and legislation they put forward. And to hear these firsthand accounts of kind of, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Here's why it didn't make sense. I think those are important. So thank you for joining Diverge Media tonight.
Oh, you're doing such a good job, Greg. Bringing out stories like this and others and all the injustices that are going on. So keep up the good work.
Really appreciate that, Scott. And thanks everybody for joining us. Catch you next time. We'll be live Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern for the Sunday show. Thank you.